Standing here and there, I sometimes recall what times and what people we had in our parts when I, oh dear Lord, had just begun to grow up as a little boy in my parents' house in the village of Humulești, just across the Neamț River from the market town, a large and cheerful village divided into 3 areas that all counted as one, the village hearth, Deleni, and Bejeni. And Humulești, even back then, was not just any place full of aimless people, but an old freeholder village, established in the full sense of the word, with hard-working householders, one better than the other, sturdy lads and proud girls who knew how to turn both the horror and the weaving shuttle, so that the whole village hummed with looms from all directions, with a fine church and such priests, teachers, and villagers that they brought great honor to their home. And Father Iowan, from under the hill, Lord, what a worthy and kind man he was! At his urging, so many fruit trees were planted in the churchyard, which was fenced with heavy beams and roofed with shingles, and such a fine small cell was built at the church gate for the school. And then, to see the tireless priest going from house to house in the village, together with Vasile of Ilioi, the church cantor, a strong and handsome fellow, advising people to send their children to school. And before long, a whole crowd of boys and girls gathered at school, among whom I was as well, a scrawny, shy, and fearful boy, afraid even of my own shadow. And the very first schoolgirl was none other than the priest's daughter, Smaranditsa, a quick little thing, sharp-minded and so diligent that she outdid nearly all the boys in both learning and mischief. But the priest would come by the school almost every day to see what was happening. And one day he came bringing us a new long bench, and after asking the cantor how we behaved, he pondered a bit, then named the bench the Roan Horse, and left it there. Another day the priest came again, this time with old Fotea, the village furrier, who brought us a brand new school gift, a pretty little leather whip, braided nicely. The priest named it Saint Nicholas, after the patron saint of the Humulești church. Then he asked old Fotea that if he ever got more good strips of leather, he should make another one from time to time, maybe even a bit thicker, if possible. Vasile smiled, and we pupils stared at each other with wide eyes. The priest then set the rule that every Saturday the boys and girls were to be recited, meaning the cantor would listen to each of us on what we had learned during the week, and any mistakes would be marked with charcoal, and in the end, for every mistake, one St. Nicholas would be applied. The priest's daughter, being lively and full of mischief, burst out laughing. Poor thing! "Well then, mount the roan, young lady," said the priest sternly. "Let us honor St. Nicholas in the cupboard." And despite the efforts of old Fotea and Vasile, Smaranditsa took her punishment, and afterwards sat with her hands over her eyes, crying like a bride, her blouse nearly jumping off her. We were stunned. But then the priest, bringing round pretzels and bread from the church day after day, softened us all, and things went smoothly. The boys changed the writing slates daily, and Saturday was recitation day. Not that we didn't find our own ways around things from time to time, for from the stick that held the little sheet with the cross-help and letters written by Vasile for each of us, we moved on to primers, from primers to the Psalter. And then, Lord have mercy, when the priest and cantor were gone, we would sneak into the churchyard, open the Psalter, and as the pages were a bit greasy, the flies and fat bees would rush to them, and when we clapped the Psalter shut, we would crush 10 or 20 souls at once, disaster upon the flies. One day the priest looked through our psalters, and when he saw the pages all blood-stained, he put his hands on his head in despair, and once he learned why, he invited each of us to the roan, and comforted us well with St. Nicholas for the sufferings of the holy flies and holy bees who had perished because of us. Not long after that, one day in May, near the feast of the departed, foolish Vasile, yes, I'll call him that, thought to have Nică, son of Costache, examine me. Nică, an older boy, advanced in learning to the frog's knee, was angry with me because of Smaranditsa, to whom I had once given a flick since she wouldn't let me catch flies. And Nică began listening to me, and listened, and then started marking mistakes by the handful, 1, 2, 3, up to 29. This is too much, I thought. He's not even finished, and how many more will there be? My sight darkened, and I trembled with fury. What to do, Nică? I wondered. Looking secretly at the door of salvation, I stomped anxiously, waiting for another pupil to come in, for we were forbidden to go out 2 at a time, and my teeth hurt seeing no one arriving to spare me from riding the roan and the blessing of Nicholas the bruise-maker. But real St. Nicholas must have known my plight, for suddenly a boy rushed inside. Then I slipped to the door, ran outside, and without lingering around the school, I bolted toward home. Looking back, 2 boys were already chasing me. I ran so fast my feet barely touched the ground. I passed our house but didn't go in. Instead, I swerved left into a neighbor's yard, from the yard into the shed, and from the shed into the corn garden recently hoed. The boys kept chasing me. In my fear, God knows how, I managed to bury myself at the root of a cornstalk. Nică and Toter passed right by, grumbling angrily, but God must have blinded them, for they didn't notice me. Once all was quiet, no rustling leaves, no scratching hens, I burst up from the dirt and ran home crying, telling Mother that I would never return to school, even if they killed me. Next day, the priest came by, spoke with Father, calmed me down, and took me back. It's a sin to remain without learning, he said. You passed the first reading lessons. You're at the Psalter now, and soon you'll reach the Psalm book, the key to all learning. And who knows what the future holds? You may even become a priest here in St. Nicholas's church. I labor for you all. I have only one daughter. God knows whom I'll choose as my son-in-law. Ah, when I heard of becoming a priest and of Smaranditsa, I forgot the flies and took new measures. I started writing more, swinging the censer in church, holding the tone, acting like a proper boy. The priest began to like me. Smaranditsa sometimes glanced my way. Vasile had me examine others. Things were turning. Nică, hoarse and ill-tempered, no longer had power over me. But things are not as man thinks, but as God wills. One day, on St. Phocas's feast, the village chief called people to work on the road. It was said the prince would pass through. And Vasile said, "Let's go, boys. Help with the road so the prince won't say our village is lazier than others." So we all went. Some dug, some carried earth, some hauled with carts. Everyone worked eagerly. The chief, with the guard and some unwashed petty nobles, walked around supervising. Suddenly we saw a commotion downstream, several men piled together, one of them groaning loudly. "What's happening?" people cried, running from all sides. They had seized Vasile for the army with the dragnet, beating him hard, putting him in shackles to send him to Piatra. That's why the chief had called everyone out, to trick them and capture recruits. That's how it was done back then. Boys were taken by deceit into the army. A cursed sight it was. The young men disappeared at once. We children went home crying. Cursed be the village chief, and may St. Phocas burn his heart today, as he burned the heart of that mother, the women cried. And Vasile's mother followed him to Piatra, weeping as if for the dead. "Mother," Vasile said, "the world is not only what the eyes see. A man can live well in the army if he is worthy. Even St. George and St. Demetrius and others were soldiers who suffered for Christ. If only we could be like them." Well, well, we lost poor Vasile. He went where fate had written for him. And Father Iowan now wandered, hair in the wind, trying to find another cantor, but he never found another like Vasile, wise, hard-working, and as modest as a maiden. There was old Iordache, the wheezer from the big choir stall. But what good was he? He knew the church chants by heart, true, but he wheezed from old age, and besides that, he had the gift of sipping. And so, the school remained empty for a while, and a few of us who stayed close to Father Iowan managed as we could. The church opens a man's mind. On Sundays we buzzed in the choir, and then, wish, a pretzel or two. And when the 2 great eves of the year came, 30 or 40 boys would run ahead of the priest, trampling the snow from one house to another. At Christmas we neighed like colts, and at Epiphany we shouted Kyrie eleison until the whole village boiled with noise. And when the priest arrived, we would line up in 2 rows and make way for him, and he would stroke his beard proudly and say to the host, "These are my young colts, my son. They wait for such great days all year with great joy. Have you prepared boiled wheat, dumplings, hempseed cakes, and cabbage pies? We have, Holy Father. Bless our house and table, and please stay a while, so our guests may stay too." When we heard the word table, we swarmed upon it, and then, good luck, mouths, as the saying goes, for pies the mouth rejoices, and for cabbage pies even more. What could you do? The eve only comes twice a year. Once, I remember, we crowded so hard that we overturned the man's whole table, with all the dishes, in the middle of the house, burning the priest's cheeks red with shame. But he, still kind. Where there's none, none spills, my sons, but a little more care never hurts. Then, at the church's patron feast, the banquet lasted a whole week, and you needed a strong stomach to hold all the wheat puddings and dishes. Priests, cantors, bishops, and all sorts of people from everywhere gathered at the feast of Humulești's church, and all went home pleased. And in the homes of villagers, many strangers were fed as well, and my mother, God rest her, was overjoyed whenever guests came by, and she had a chance to share her bread with them. Whether my sons will give alms for my soul after I die or not, better that I give with my own hand now. Teeth are always closer than parents, no matter what people say. And while I studied at school, my mother studied with me at home, and now read the Psalter and Alexandria better than I did, and she rejoiced deeply seeing how I leaned toward books. As for father, who often teased me, saying, "Scribe, cheese on the nail, sour milk in the inkpot, cries and sighs through your pockets," well, from him I could have remained as would have been best. Nică, son of Stefan of Petrea, an honest and hard-working man of Humulești. As the saying goes, better first in your village than last in town. But mother was ready to spin all day, just to send me further to school, and she kept nudging father to send me somewhere else to study, for she had heard read in church, in the Parimaya, that a learned man will be wise, and the unlearned will serve him. And besides that, the old fortune-tellers who draw 41 beans in a sieve, the astrologers, the fortune readers my mother had visited for my sake, and the devout women from church had filled her head with all sorts of strange notions, that I would live among great people, that I was full of luck, like hair on a frog, that I had the voice of an angel, and many other marvels. In her weakness for me, mother had come to believe I would become a second Cucuzel, the pride of Christendom, who brought tears from stone hearts, gathered the world into the forest wilderness, and gladdened all creation with his song. "Lord, woman, you need a lot more sense," father would say, seeing how stubborn she was about me. "If everyone were to turn into scholars, as you think, who would pull our boots off? Haven't you heard the tale of the one who went an ox to Paris and came back a cow? Did Grigor, son of Petrea Luca, learn at any school, that he can tell so many tall tales and jokes at weddings? Don't you see? If there's no wit in one's head, then there isn't, and that's that." "Be that as it may," mother said, "I want my boy to become a priest. Hear me." "Of course, a priest," father said. "Listen to her. Don't you see he's a lazy good-for-nothing, thin and slow, with no equal? In the morning, waking him would drain your soul. Once awake, he wants food. Small as he is, he catches flies with the salter and spends the whole day running along the riverbanks instead of grazing the calves and helping me with chores as much as he can. In winter, on the ice, and with the sled. You and your school spoiled him. When he grows older, he'll start sniffing after skirts, and with such habits, I'll get no good from him ever. And as I have the honor to tell you, much talk went on between mother and father about me, until that same summer, around August, when the dreadful cholera of '48 came and began harvesting lives in Humulești, left and right, so that cries could be heard from all parts of the village. And I, restless as I was, kept running to the gate whenever a funeral passed, chanting mockingly, "Little magpie, big magpie, what have you in your pan? Food for the chicks I carry to the elder grove. Blessed is the woodpecker who sits atop the elder tree, praying to the thorn bush and bowing to the cuckoo. Not for me, nor for thee, but for the hag in the pit. Give her cow after cow, and 2 oxen to be still." Then I would follow the funeral all the way to the church and come back home with my shirt stuffed full of pretzels, dried apples, gilded nuts, carob pods, and figs from the dead man's basket, until father and mother crossed themselves seeing me. So, to keep me out of trouble, they sent me to the sheepfold in Agapia's Grove, near Karagica Bridge, where our sheep were, to stay there until the plague eased. But overnight the cholera struck me too, twisting me with cramps, burning me with thirst, and the shepherds and the herdsmen knew nothing of it. They only turned over in their sleep at my groans and snored on. Meanwhile, I crawled as best I could to the well behind the fold and drank, every few minutes, whole little buckets of water. I can say that night the well was my cradle, for I did not close my eyes even as long as flint sparks. Only near dawn did Vasile Bordeanu, our lathe worker, take pity and walk 2 hours to Humulești to inform father, who came with the cart and took me home. All the way I begged for water, and father kept promising from one well to another until, thank God, we reached the village. There, the village doctors, old Vasile Chandura and another whose name I forget, were at our house frying in a large cauldron some cloths soaked in tallow, and after rubbing me well with lovage vinegar, I remember clearly, they laid the hot cloths on a sheet and wrapped me entirely in them like a baby. I don't know how long it took until I fell into a dead sleep, and only the next day, around noon, I awoke as healthy as any healthy man. God rest old Chandura and his companion. And as the saying goes, a bad habit doesn't vanish at once. By evening I had already roamed through most of the village, and even taken a dip in the river with my friend Chiriac, son of Goyan, a scamp and idler just like me. But father said nothing then. He left me to my own ways for a while. Over the winter, mother once again started in on father to send me somewhere to school, but father said he no longer had money to spend on me. For Cantor Vasile, son of Vasilka, I only paid a sorokovets a month. But this other one, Simeon Fosa from Tutsuyeni, just because he speaks more slowly than the rest and sniffs tobacco all day long, demands 3 huzish a month. Imagine that. The boy isn't worth so many huzish, clothes and all, as I've already spent on him. When mother heard that, she flared up. Poor man, since you don't know a letter of the alphabet, how could you understand me? When you drag your sorokovets for your mustache, why don't you complain as much then? Petre Todosica, our innkeeper, didn't he bleed 900 lei out of you? Vasile Roibu from Bejeni, nearly as much, and how many others? For Rushtia, daughter of Valika, and Mariuka, daughter of Onofre, you always find money to give and give again. I know, don't think Smiranda is asleep. May you sleep the eternal sleep yourself. And for the boy you have nothing to give? Man, oh man, You'll go to the bottom of hell, and no one will pull you out if you don't make a priest of at least one son. You run from confession as the devil from incense. You go to church from Easter to Easter. Is this how you care for your soul? Now hush, woman, said father, for the church is in a man's heart, and when I die, I'll still be sitting in church. Don't play the hypocrite like that Pharisee. Better strike yourself on the mouth and say like the publican, God, be merciful to me, a sinner, for I foul my mouth scolding my husband for nothing. In the end, however much they wrangled over me, mother had her way. One Sunday, toward midwinter, mother's father, my grandfather David Creangă, from Pipirig, came to visit. Seeing the quarrel between them because of me, he said, Come now, Stefan and Smaranduka, don't fret so much. Today is Sunday, tomorrow is Monday, and market day, and Tuesday, if we're still alive and well, I'll take the boy with me to Brosteni with my son Dumitru to teach a Nicolae Nanu at Baloș's school. You'll see what he can make of the lad. I was very pleased with what my other boys, Vasile and Gheorghe, learned there. For more than 20 years that I've held the village chief's staff in Pipirig, I had a hard time managing with just the tally stick. What good that I can read any church book if I cannot record even a little? It's hard. But since the boys return from their schooling, they keep the accounts coin by coin, and I live in comfort. Now I can say you can hold the office for life without feeling the burden. Truly, Alecu Baloș did us a great charity with that school of his, if people would only understand. And what a wise and skillful teacher he found there. He speaks so gently and welcomes everyone so kindly that it's a joy to go to him. Blessed are the parents who bore him. He has a good heart, I tell you, and especially for us, the mountain peasants, he's a great benefactor. When I came with my father and brothers, Petrea and Vasile and Nică, from Transylvania to Pipirig, 60-odd years ago, where had anyone heard of schools like Baloș's in Moldavia? Only in Iași, perhaps, or at Neamț Monastery in the days of Metropolitan Jacob, who was somewhat kin to us through Cubuc, the bell-ringer of Neamț, your great-grandfather, Smaranda, whose name still stands written today on the bell of Pipirig's church. Cubuc the bell-ringer also came from Transylvania and knew a little reading, like me. He too left that land, drove his herds here, as did old Dediu from Vanatori and other shepherds, mostly because of the persecutions, as far as I know. He was so prosperous that he filled the mountains, Halauca, Piatra lui Iepure, Bernarul, Cotnarelul, and Boampele, up beyond Potruvoda, with his flocks and herds. They say Cubuc was a hospitable man. Every guest who stopped at his lodge was welcomed with a glad heart and feasted to the full. His kindness and wealth were famed in all the region. Even the prince is said to have stayed once at his house, and when he asked with whom Cubuc shared such great riches, the man replied, "With those weak in mind and strong in virtue, your grace." The prince could not help marveling. Well now, that man is a man, I say. If there were many like him in my realm, the country would lack little in times of need. Then the prince clapped him on the shoulder, saying, "Old man, know that from today you are my man, and the doors of my court are open to you at any time." And from then on, Cubuc was known as the prince's man, so that even today a hill near Plotin, where he mostly lived, is called the Man's Hill. On that very hill, Smaranda, we fled during the uprising. You, your mother, your brother Iowan, and I, fleeing a band of Turks who had just fought the volunteers at Secu and were heading to Pipirig to plunder. In our haste, we forgot your sister Ioana at home, on the porch, in her little cradle. When your mother realized the child was missing, she began tearing her hair and sobbing, "Woe is me, my child, the Turks have pierced her." But I climbed to the top of a fir tree, and seeing the Turks take the road toward Plotin, I flung myself onto a horse's mane, galloped home, and there I found the child safe, though overturned with the cradle by some pigs grunting around her, near tearing her to pieces. At the foot of the cradle, I found a few rubles, likely left by the Turks at the child's head. I took the girl, and, in my joy, I don't even know how I reached your mother with her on the man's hill. When I came to my senses a little, I said in my bitterness, as many have said before me, those who have no children don't know what trouble is. Those are wise indeed who never marry. One such was Cubuk the shepherd, having neither wife nor child, whether from his great piety or from other reasons. He later donated all his wealth to Neamt's monastery and took the tonsure along with most of his herdsmen, making many offerings while alive. Today he rests in peace near the monastery walls. God forgive and rest him in his heavenly kingdom. For we too, tomorrow or the day after, must go there. You would know none of this if I hadn't told you, grandfather said with a sigh. It's no bad thing, Stefan, for your boy to learn a bit of reading, he went on, not necessarily to become a priest as Smaranda imagines, for the priesthood has its own troubles and is a heavy burden. Better no priest than a bad one, but letters bring some comfort. Had I not known how to read, I'd have gone mad long ago from all I've carried on my shoulders. Instead, I open the lives of the saints and see so many and so many trials, and I say, Lord, what patience you gave your chosen ones. Our hardships are nothing compared with what the books tell, and it's not good for a man to be a complete ox either. From books you gather much wisdom, and, to speak plainly, you're not just a cow for everyone to milk. The boy seems to have a good memory, and, with what little he's learned, reads and sings as well as can be. Of such things, Grandfather David spoke with mother and father nearly all night, Sunday to Monday, and Monday to Tuesday, for he would come down from Piperig to our village on Mondays for the fair to buy what he needed. Early Tuesday morning he saddled the horses, put the saddlebags on them, and tied them neatly. The second horse's halter to the first horse's tail, the third to the second, the fourth to the third, just as the mountain folk do. Then he said, Well then, Stefan and Smaranduka, stay well. I'm off now. Come on, grandson. Are you ready? Ready, grandfather. Let's go, I said, struggling with some smoked pork ribs and grilled sausages mother had set before me. And so, after taking my leave of my parents, I set out with grandfather toward Piperig. It was such a bitter little frost that morning that the very wood cracked. And just above Vanatori, as we crossed the bridge over the Neamts River, grandfather behind me with the horses by the halter and I ahead, my boots slipped, and I fell into the Ozana head first like a sack of wheat. Thank heaven for grandfather. These fancy boots of yours are nothing but trouble, he said, as he pulled me out quickly, soaked to the skin and nearly frozen stiff, for ice was forming everywhere. He yanked my boots off at once. They had turned to stone. A pinchy are better, poor things. They keep your feet rested, and in the cold you live like a lord in them. And before he finished saying this, I was already wrapped in a thick Kashina wool coat, shoved into a saddlebag on the horse, and off we went toward Piperig. And when grandmother saw me all huddled up in that saddlebag, like a little abandoned kitten, she nearly died of crying. I have never seen such a woman. She cried for everything. She was soft-hearted beyond measure. She never touched beef in her life, out of pity. And when she went to the cemetery on feast days, she would weep over all the dead, whether kin or stranger, without distinction. Grandfather, however, was a steady man who minded his work as he knew best and let grandmother stay busy with her own notions, as a woman's mind tends to do. "Oh, Lord, David, will you never calm down? Why drag the boy from home in such weather?" she said. "So you can marvel, Nastasi," grandfather replied, pulling out a wild boar hide from the pantry and cutting a pair of opinsi for Dumitru and for me. Then he shaped them nicely and threaded black horsehair laces through the holes. On the third day, after giving us clean clothes and 2 pairs of white wool foot wraps each, we tied on our pinchi nicely, kissed grandmother's hand, and set out through Boboiești. With grandfather and Dumitru, mother's youngest brother, we climbed up behind Halauca and reached Farcasha, where we spent the night together with Father Dumitru of Piraul Cârje, who had a goiter as big as a large flask and wheezed through it like through a bagpipe, so we could hardly close our eyes all night for the noise. Not his fault, poor priest. As he himself said, it's worse for those who have the goiter in their heads than for those who carry it on the outside. Next day we set off from Farcasha toward Borca, then on to Paraul Cârje and Cotergaș until we reached Broșteni. After finding us lodging, with all expenses paid, at the house of a woman named Nică, grandfather took us to the teacher and to the church, had us bow before the icons, then left us in good health and returned home, sending us necessities from time to time. Broșteni was scattered like most mountain villages. Wolves and bears had no shame showing up at noon. A house here under one hillside, another across the Bistrița under another hillside. Each man built where it suited him. Nică had an old log hut with windows no bigger than your palm, roofed with boards, fenced with fir poles, tucked right under the mountain on the left bank of the Bistrița near the bridge. She was neither young nor old, had a husband and a gawky, drooling daughter one would be afraid to spend a night with in the house. Luckily, from Monday morning to Saturday evening, you never saw her. She went with her father into the mountains to cut window planks, working like a man all week for almost nothing. 2 people with 2 oxen in winter barely earned enough for a pot of mamaliga. Many came home on Saturday night with broken legs or bruised oxen. That was their profit. Her entire wealth was the hut on the Bistrița's bank, the husband, the daughter, the oxen, a goat and 2 thin, mangy goats, sleeping always in the entryway. But even that is wealth when a person is healthy. As for me, better to mind our own story. Once grandfather left, we went to school the next day. The teacher saw we wore our hair long and ordered a student to cut it. When we heard that, we cried rivers of tears, begging all the saints not to disfigure us. But no use. The teacher stayed beside us until we were shaved bald. Then he lined us up with the others and set us lessons according to our ability, including "The Angel Cried," to be memorized. And we stayed so until mid-Lent. One fine morning we found ourselves covered head to toe in goat mange from Nică goats. What now? The teacher would not let us in. Nică could not cure us. No way to notify grandfather. Our provisions were running out. We were in trouble. Near Annunciation, a great thaw came. The snow melted. Streams burst forth. The Bistrița swelled bank to bank, nearly sweeping Nică house away. And in that warmth we smeared ourselves with cloudy lye, sat outside in the sun naked until the ashes dried on our skin, then plunged into the Bistrița for a bath. An old woman had told us it would cure the mange. Imagine bathing in the Bistrița at Broșteni twice a day during the Great Fast. Yet no chills, no fevers, no sickness touched us, but neither did the mange leave us. As the saying goes, it sticks like mange to a man. One day, with Nică away in the village, as she always dawdled like the constable's daughter, we climbed the mountain behind her house, each carrying a fir pole. A roaring white torrent like milk rushed down, and the devil put it in our heads to dislodge a big boulder that was barely held in place. Down it went, leaping higher than a man, smashing through the fence and the entryway, over the goats, straight into the Bistrița, making the water boil. It was Lazarus Saturday, around noon. What now? The fence and house smashed, a goat torn to pieces. No joking matter. We forgot the mange entirely. We were so terrified. Grab whatever you have before the old woman returns, and let's flee on that raft to my brother Vasile in Borca, said Dumitru, for the rafts had begun running. We snatched what we owned, ran to the raft, and the rafters took us aboard and set off. What Irinuka must have said after us, I do not know. But I do know we were frozen with fear until we reached Borca, where we spent the night. Next morning, Palm Sunday, we left Borca early along Plaiul Bătrin with 2 mounted border guards toward Piperig. It was such a fine day that the guards said they had never seen spring arrive so early. Dumitru and I sang and gathered violets and primroses, jumping and playing as if we were not the mangy boys from Broshteni who had brought such ruin to Irinuka's household. But around noon, the fine weather turned into a terrible storm, trees nearly blown down. Old Baba Docia had not shed all her coats. First drizzle, then sleet, then serious snow. In a moment the path vanished. Snow and fog to the ground. You couldn't see the man beside you. See how the weather has turned? Sighed one guard. No wonder the wolves ate well this winter. We've lost the trail since Insurcatori. From here on, we go blind and trust fate. I hear a rooster crowing, said the other guard. Let's head that way. Maybe we'll reach a village. We descended with tremendous difficulty down dangerous slopes, tangled in fir thickets, horses slipping and sliding, Dumitru and I shivering and crying into our fists from cold, the guards groaning and biting their lips, snow to our waists in places. It was near nightfall when we reached a hollow, where we heard a little stream tumbling over rocks, just like us, coming from above, knocking against stones without choice. Only the stream went on. We stayed and made a fire without water. Well, boys, time to sleep, said one guard, striking sparks and lighting a fir tree. What's written on your brow will happen. Cheer up, said the other, pulling a frozen crust from his bag, roasting it, and giving us each a chunk. That crust slid down our throats like butter. After eating, we curled around the fire. Above us snow, under us mud. One side freezing, the other roasting, exactly as that time and place demanded. And as we struggled, another danger nearly struck. We were almost crushed by the burning fir tree had one guard not noticed. Surely Irinuka's curse had caught us. At last, morning came. After washing with snow and making the sign of the cross, we climbed back up the way we had come. The snowfall weakened, and after much struggle, we found the path. And onward until evening, we reached Grandfather David in Piperig. When Grandmother saw us, she burst into tears. David wants to bury me alive with his stubborn ways. And look at these poor boys, how the mange has eaten them among strangers. After crying over us as she always did, she fed us everything good she had, stuffed us well, then hurried to the pantry, brought out a jug of birch tar, and anointed us from head to toe. She laid us on the warm oven. She did this 2 or 3 times a day and night until Good Friday, when we awoke completely cured. But by then, news had reached Piperig about the damage in Broshteni, and Grandfather paid Irinuka 4 gold coins without a word. Then, on Holy Saturday, he sent me home to my parents in Humulești. On Easter Day, I sang The Angel Cried in church so beautifully that everyone stared open-mouthed. Mother was ready to swallow me from joy. Father Ioan seated me at his table, and Smaranditsa tapped many red eggs with me. Joy after joy piled on my head. But at the second resurrection, things didn't go as well. When all the village girls came to church, some of the mischievous ones, seeing me bald, burst out laughing. Bald P, the dogs chase after him.